Welcome to Crypto Journal. Hit like on this video if you want more content about real blockchain infrastructure without promotions or interruptions. And leave me in the comments what you want me to explore next. I read every single comment. There's a blockchain project that appeared at SIBOS in Frankfurt in October 2025, SIBOS, the annual summit where SWIFT, central banks, and the world's largest financial institutions gather to discuss the future of global payments. For a Web3 startup founded in 2021 to be invited to SIBOS isn't just remarkable. It's a signal that institutions recognize something most retail investors have completely missed. That project is Zebec Network. And today we're going to explore why ZBCN might be the most strategically positioned ISO 20022 compatible infrastructure that nobody's talking about. Not because of marketing or hype, but because of what they're actually building and who they're building it with. This isn't another analysis about which tokens are ISO 20022 compliant. This is about understanding the missing piece in the ISO 20022 puzzle that every other analysis ignores: the last mile delivery of value. The actual moment when money moves from institution to individual. That's where Zebec operates. And that's why institutions are paying attention. Let's start with what everyone else is saying about ISO 20022. The narrative goes like this. SWIFT migrates to ISO 20022 on November 22nd, 2025. Banks need compliant infrastructure. XRP, XLM, XDC, Algorand, and others provide that infrastructure. Therefore, institutional money flows to these networks. That analysis is correct but incomplete. It describes the highway system, but ignores the roads connecting institutions to people. It describes how banks talk to each other, but not how banks actually deliver value to employees, contractors, gig workers, and individuals. That gap is where $300 million in annual transaction volume is currently moving through Zebec's infrastructure, and almost nobody is paying attention. Here's what makes Zebec different. Every other ISO 20022 compatible network focuses on institution-to-institution settlement, bank-to-bank, exchange to exchange, treasury to treasury. These are critical infrastructure layers, but they're not where most people interact with money. Most people interact with money through payroll, through remittances, through everyday payments and subscriptions. Zebec built streaming payment infrastructure that operates in real time, not batch payments every 2 weeks, not monthly settlements, per second money flow. An employee working right now is earning right now and can access those earnings right now. A contractor delivering work gets paid as they deliver it, not 30 days later. This isn't a minor improvement. This is a fundamental reimagining of how value flows from institutions to individuals. But here's where it connects to ISO 20022. Zebec doesn't operate in isolation. It integrates with Stellar, which provides ISO 20022 compliant messaging frameworks. It integrates with Algorand, which brings institutional-grade security and CBDC infrastructure. It partners with Circle for USDC, with Ondo Finance for yield-bearing stablecoins backed by US treasuries, and with Ripple's ecosystem through technical infrastructure connections. In June 2025, Zebec CEO Simon Babakani explicitly stated they were working closely with Stellar, not just on payment rails, but on reward infrastructure and institutional custody design. PayPal launched PYUSD on Stellar in June 2025. SOC Gen issues ERC stablecoins on Stellar. Stellar offers ISO 20022 compliant messaging, low-cost settlement, and growing fiat-anchored liquidity. Now imagine the stack. Stellar provides the ISO 20022 compliant rails. Circle and PayPal provide stablecoin liquidity. Ondo provides yield-bearing treasury-backed assets. And Zebec provides the interface that actually delivers this value to individuals in real time. A US freelancer gets paid in USDC. A Nigerian developer receives PYUSD. A Berlin educator streams EURC, all through the same interface. All on ISO 20022 compatible infrastructure. This is the vision nobody's discussing. Everyone focuses on how banks will move trillions between themselves. But what happens when those trillions need to reach actual people? That's the last mile problem. And Zebec is building the infrastructure to solve it. Let me show you the institutional validation. In September 2025, Zebec completed SC2 compliance, the security standard required for enterprise use. They're pursuing European Union MiCA approval and targeting ISO 27001 certification by year-end. These aren't just boxes to check. These are the regulatory requirements that allow Zebec to work with banks, governments, and Fortune 500 companies. In 2025, Zebec acquired Gainox, embedding native KYC, KYB, and AML checks directly into their protocol. When institutions deploy Zebec's payroll infrastructure, compliance happens automatically. This addresses the single biggest barrier to institutional blockchain adoption: regulatory risk. Now let's talk about what's actually operational right now. Zebec processes over $300 million annually through their real-time payroll system. They serve thousands of US employees, including charter school staff through PayBridge. They've acquired school payroll services, extending their reach to hundreds of schools nationwide. They acquired Science Card in May 2025, bringing thousands of education sector users into their ecosystem. These aren't pilot programs. These are working systems moving real money for real institutions. 200 plus enterprise clients use Zebec's infrastructure. 900 plus Zebec cards have been issued across 97 countries. In the past 4 weeks alone, they processed $52 million in transaction volume, a 7% increase from the previous period. But here's what makes this strategically powerful. Zebec operates as middleware. They don't need every company to build blockchain infrastructure from scratch. They provide the tools that plug into existing payroll systems, adding real-time streaming capabilities and blockchain settlement without requiring companies to completely rebuild their financial operations. Through their investment arm payroll growth partners, Zebec acquires traditional payroll companies and integrates Web3 capabilities. This is how institutional adoption actually happens. Not by convincing banks to abandon their systems, but by upgrading existing systems with blockchain capabilities that deliver measurable improvements. Now, let's connect this to the November 22nd, 2025 ISO 20022 deadline. When SWIFT completes its migration, banks face a choice. They can maintain expensive legacy infrastructure with slow settlement times and high fees. Or they can adopt blockchain-based infrastructure that speaks ISO 20022 natively, settles in seconds, and costs a fraction of a cent per transaction. For institution-to-institution payments, they'll use networks like XRP, Stellar, XDC, and Algorand. But for institution-to-individual payments, payroll, remittances, contractor payments, gig worker settlements, they'll need something that operates at the individual level with compliance built in. That's Zebec's positioning. Consider the use case. A multinational corporation needs to pay 50,000 employees across 30 countries. Traditionally, this requires local bank accounts, currency conversions, multi-day settlement times, and high fees. With Zebec on ISO 20022 compliant rails, the company streams stablecoins in real time. Employees receive funds instantly on Zebec cards that work at 80 million plus merchants globally through MasterCard and Visa networks. And settlement happens on blockchain with full compliance and auditability. The corporation saves money. Employees access earnings immediately. Compliance is automated. And the entire flow operates on ISO 20022 compatible infrastructure through Stellar, Algorand, and other enterprise blockchains Zebec integrates with. This is why Zebec was at Sibos. This is why they're pursuing MiCA approval and ISO 27001 certification. This is why they've integrated with Algorand, specifically emphasizing ISO 20022 compliance. They're positioning themselves as the last-mile infrastructure for the tokenized economy. Now, let's talk about something that surfaced in October 2025 that almost nobody noticed. A podcast called Ruel Black Crypto Podcast published an investigation revealing technical connections between Zebec, Quant's Overledger, and Ripple's Interledger architecture. They pulled direct GitHub evidence showing that Coinbase Commerce, Overledger, and Ethereum Sepolia testnet share the same on-chain API infrastructure. Here's what that means. Zebec moves value in real time. Quant moves data across blockchains through Overledger. Ripple ensures settlement is bank compliant through XRP and RippleNet. Together, they form an interoperability triangle. And the connective tissue is Fireblocks, the institutional-grade custody infrastructure that both Quant's authorized product and Zebec's treasury systems use for key management and transaction signing. When Zebec executes a streaming USDC payment, the signing process flows through the same custody architecture that Quant and RippleNet institutions use. This isn't officially announced as a partnership, but the technical infrastructure suggests these systems are designed to interoperate at the protocol level. Coinbase Ventures is one of Zebec's early investors. Coinbase Commerce explicitly describes real-time USDC settlement, the same design Zebec employs for business payroll automation. Circle, which issues USDC, is also aligned with Ripple through RLUSD stablecoin initiatives. The architecture forms an invisible alliance connecting payment execution, interoperability, custody, and compliance. This matters because when ISO 20022 becomes mandatory, institutions need infrastructure that connects all these pieces. They need ISO 20022 compliant messaging through networks like Stellar and Algorand. They need cross-chain interoperability through Quant. They need bank-compliant settlement through Ripple. And they need last-mile value delivery to individuals through platforms like Zebec. Now let's address the regulatory environment. The Genius Act passed in July 2025, setting federal rules for stablecoins with full reserve backing, monthly reports, and custody safeguards. This was the green light institutions were waiting for. The Clarity Act is advancing as the market structure framework for crypto assets. Zebec positioned itself perfectly for this environment. Their SEC2 compliance, pending MiCA approval, and ISO 27001 pursuit mean they'll be ready when European and US regulations become fully operational. They're not reacting to regulations. They're building compliance into their infrastructure from the beginning. In October 2025, the SC issued a no-action letter for DE-PIN tokens like ZBCN, classifying them as non-securities. This sparked a 3% sector-wide rally. Zebec's physical infrastructure through point-of-sale devices and payroll integrations aligns with this classification. Reduced regulatory risk attracts institutional capital specifically looking for compliant infrastructure. On October 15, 2025, Kraken listed ZBCN, adding another major exchange venue. This followed a 21.6% weekly rally and technical patterns suggesting further upside. But price movements aren't the story here. The story is institutional positioning. Uphold, the multi-asset platform known for supporting XRP, holds over $100 million in ZBCN. They recently collaborated with Zebec on an XRP-based incentive campaign, rewarding top XRP holders who engage with Zebec's streaming services. This hints at deeper alignment between Zebec, Uphold, and potentially Ripple's broader ecosystem. Now let's talk about ZebecNet, announced in August 2025. This is a decentralized ESM network for global transactions, built in partnership with World Mobile. World Mobile has 2.1 million daily active users and 60,000 plus nodes, more locations than McDonald's and Starbucks combined. They're bringing connectivity to underbanked regions where traditional telecom infrastructure doesn't exist. ZebecNet combines connectivity with payments. Users get data service through eSIM while simultaneously accessing Zebec's real-time payroll and payment tools. This creates a complete financial infrastructure for regions that lack both reliable internet and banking services. The October 2025 beta launch in select markets is the first step toward delivering always-on payroll and payments in 70+ countries via decentralized mobile infrastructure. Think about the implications. Billions of people globally lack access to traditional banking. They also lack reliable internet connectivity. World Mobile solves connectivity. Zebec solves payments. Together, they create financial infrastructure that doesn't depend on traditional banks or legacy telecom carriers. And all of this operates on ISO 20022 compatible rails through Stellar, Algorand, and other enterprise blockchains. when central banks deploy CBDCs, when governments tokenize social services, when corporations adopt real-time payroll, the infrastructure connecting institutions to individuals in underbanked regions will be critical. ZBCN is building that infrastructure right now. Let's be clear about what we're not saying. We're not promising ZBCN will 100x. We're not saying there's no risk. We're not saying this is financial advice. Technology can fail. Competitors can emerge. Regulations can shift. Market conditions can deteriorate. What we are saying is this: follow the institutional movement. Zebec appeared at CBO's 2025 alongside SWIFT, central banks, and the world's largest financial institutions. They're pursuing every major compliance certification. They're integrating with every major ISO 20022 compatible blockchain. They're processing $300 million annually in real transaction volume. And they're building the last mile infrastructure that delivers tokenized value to actual people. When banks complete their ISO 20022 migration, when stablecoins become regulated under Genius, when tokenized assets scale under Clarity, institutions will need infrastructure that delivers value from their systems to individuals. That infrastructure needs to be fast, cheap, compliant, and user-friendly. It needs to work with MasterCard and Visa networks. It needs to integrate with existing payroll systems. And it needs to operate on ISO 20022 compatible rails. Zebec is building exactly that. While everyone debates which blockchain will handle institution-to-institution settlement, Zebec is quietly building the infrastructure that handles institution-to-individual value delivery. That's the gap in every ISO 20022 analysis. And that's why institutions invited them to CBOs. The current price of ZBCN doesn't reflect this yet. With 100 billion total supply and deflationary tokenomics through transaction fee burns, the market is still valuing Zebec primarily as a speculative asset rather than operational infrastructure. But price is always the last thing to catch up. First comes technology. Zebec built that. Then comes regulatory compliance. They're completing that now. Then comes institutional adoption. They're processing $300 million annually with 200 plus enterprise clients. Then comes infrastructure recognition. They appeared at CBOs. And finally comes price discovery, when the market realizes that the last mile infrastructure for ISO 20022 compatible value delivery is already operational and institutions are already using it. Here's the pattern nobody's discussing. XRP handles bank-to-bank liquidity. XLM handles stablecoin rails. XTC handles trade finance. Algorand handles CBDCs. Quant handles interoperability. And Zebec handles the final mile, getting that value from institutions into the hands of individuals who actually use it. All of these pieces are necessary for the tokenized economy to function. But the last mile is where most people interact with the system. When your employer adopts blockchain-based payroll, you won't know about XRP or Stellar or Algorand running in the background. You'll just know that you can access your earnings in real time through an app, spend them with a card that works everywhere, and never worry about settlement delays or high fees. That's the infrastructure Zebec is building. That's why they integrate with Stellar for ISO 20022 messaging, Algorand for institutional security, Circle for stablecoin liquidity, Ondo for yield-bearing assets, and Fireblocks for institutional-grade custody. They're assembling the complete stack required to deliver tokenized value at the individual level with compliance, security, and usability. The November 22nd deadline is coming. Banks will complete their ISO 20022 migration. Tokenized assets will scale. CBDCs will launch. Real-world assets will move on blockchain rails. And all of that institutional infrastructure will need to connect to actual people through interfaces they can use, cards they can spend, and systems that just work. Most analyses focus on the first 99% of that journey, how value moves between institutions. Zebec focuses on the last 1%, how that value reaches individuals. But that last 1% is where billions of people actually experience the financial system. And that's why institutions are paying attention. Now you understand what nobody else is talking about. You understand why Zebec appeared at CBOs. You understand how they connect to ISO 20022 compatible infrastructure through Stellar, Algorand, and potentially Ripple's ecosystem. You understand why compliance certifications matter. And you understand why the last mile delivery of value might be the most critical infrastructure piece that every other analysis ignores. Drop a comment below with your analysis. Not price predictions, but your thesis on how last mile value delivery infrastructure positions itself in the ISO 20022 ecosystem. I read every comment. See you in the next video.